Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We'd like to thank all the devotees and guests for coming to tonight's Darshan with His Divine Grace, Hridayananda Dasa Goswami, Maharaj. We'd like to officially welcome him to this program by chanting loudly, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Maharaj is one of the most senior devotees in the Hare Krishna movement, sannyasi, sannyasi guru, and author of many books. GBC Emeritus, retired, and quite a scholar and wonderful devotee, incredible sense of humor and piercing realizations that he will share with us tonight. So hang on to your seat. Hare Krishna. What?
Thank you, John. No, tonight's Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you all for coming. We, not the royal we, myself and several other people, recently published this book, A Comprehensive Guide to Bhagavad Gita with Literal Translation. Happens in the best of sampradayas. So, Prabhupada once wrote me a letter in which he said, read my books and explain them in your own words. And my own words, my own words tend to be hopefully faithful and devotional, but also Western and rational. And so, in service to Prabhupada, actually this thing will be a little more stable if we, could someone, if we push that pole that way, it'll be a little more stable. Isn't this one? Actually, wait a minute. Yeah. Again, then slide the pole. This is actually a comedy routine we do with the microphone. Okay.
Don't we have a technician?
Well, that's good. That's good, right? Yeah. Oops. Thank you. Okay, now back to our matinee. So, in service to Prabhupada, I tried to present Bhagavad Gita. First of all, there's a 150-page, what you could call systematic theology or systematic philosophy, which I try to explain categorically what is in the Gita, using the Gita's own language in the sense that because for many years, probably most of my life, I've relished reading the Gita, especially in Sanskrit, and having learned from Prabhupada what it actually means, I've always enjoyed very much reading the Gita in Sanskrit. And there are many amazing connections. If you know Sanskrit, you see, like, the same word appears in different places, and these connections don't always appear in translation. So my goal was to take the reader as deeply as possible within the Sanskrit text. The translation is very literal. Prabhupada did the hard part. He brought Krishna. And so I'm building on that. Translation is very literal. The idea was that if you read the translation, you know really exactly what's in the Sanskrit, as far as possible. That's literally, according to the literal meanings of the Sanskrit words, that's actually what it says in Sanskrit. And then the systematic philosophy or theology is based entirely on the Sanskrit text. I think I quote one other shastra in the entire book. It's the Bhagavatam, but basically it's just showing the internal connections in the Sanskrit text and how Krishna is defining terms and making points and so on. So I thought I'd give you an example of that. The point I wanted to show is that Krishna is teaching that the individual soul is subordinate to God, and that the individual soul is, with a conditioned soul, is not God, and God is not a conditioned soul. And this comes out actually just by looking at the literal meanings of the Sanskrit words. And so I thought I'd read this now and to give you the idea. Of course, the real reader is here, Damodar, but... So, terms reserved for souls. Meaning individual souls. Bhuta, Jiva, Dehi. Bhuta. Krishna often refers to souls in bodies as Bhuta, plural Bhutani, which I translate as being in the sense of a living being. Although Krishna is certainly a being, the Gita never refers to him as Bhuta, and we shall see why. The word Bhuta comes from the verbal root bhu, which means to be, but also often means to become. In this sense, Bhuta means one who has come to be, i.e., one who has become. The Gita makes clear early on, and for all the things I'm saying, I'm actually quoting verses. I'm not going to read all the numbers, but at this point, virtually almost every sentence is a paraphrase of the Gita verse, which I'm putting together, so it's actually Krishna speaking. Gita makes clear early on that both God and individual souls have always existed. For example, that's 2:12. Thus, what comes to be is not soul itself, but rather soul's ephemeral persona, produced when soul enters body. Krishna directly states that a Bhuta arises when matter and spirit combine. And that's 7:4 through 8. One may literally translate 8:19 through 20 as follows: this very group, those who have come to be, after repeatedly becoming, are helplessly dissolved. There is, however, another superior state that does not perish when all who have become are perishing. Since Krishna time and again states that souls never perish, clearly what perishes here is the composite identity formed when soul enters body. Thus, our identity as woman, man, dog, bird, or tree arises when a living conscious soul animates an otherwise dead material body, creating thereby a living temporary creature, a Bhuta. This composite persona is literally dissolved when soul leaves body. Yet, since Krishna does not take on a material body, he is not a Bhuta. His identity as Krishna does not come to be like our worldly identities. Krishna has always been Krishna, 2:12, and will forever be Krishna, the Supreme Divine Person. Bound to a material body, a Bhuta must follow nature, 3:13. The Bhuta seeks freedom from nature, 13:35. Krishna controls nature, 9:10. He is not a Bhuta. The Gita never states that his body or his identity comes to be. The Gita describes Krishna's relation to Bhutas, to souls like us, whose temporary identity does not whose souls, Bhutas, whose temporary identity does come to be. Krishna is a kind-hearted friend to every Bhuta. 529. The eternal seed of every Bhuta. 710. He knows every Bhuta, past, present, and future. 726. He is the great Lord of Bhutas. 911. And their origin. 913. He is equal to every Bhuta. 929, 1328. And as the Master causes all Bhutas to be. 1015. He is the beginning, middle, and end of Bhutas. 1020. And their preserver. 1317. He sustains Bhutas by his power. 1513. For he is their Lord. 1861. And at eon's end, the Bhuta enters Krishna's own nature. 9-7. So again, those are all verses where Krishna talks about his relationship with Bhutas. The conclusion: as souls, as persons, as parts of God, we are one with him. Yet we are also different. In this world, we do business as Bhutas. Krishna does not. The Gita employs other important terms to indicate souls, but not God. Jiva. The word jiva, life, living, usually indicates, quote, the personal or living soul as distinguished from the universal soul. And that's from the most important Sanskrit English dictionary by Monier Williams. Similarly, the term jivatman, living soul, indicates, quote, the living or personal or individual soul as distinct from the paramatman, the supreme soul. Again, that's from the dictionary. The Gita twice calls the soul jiva bhuta, living being, at 7.5 and 15.7, but never uses this term for God. The Gita also uses for individual souls, but never for God, several terms relating to our bodies. Now I discuss that. Dehan, Shariran, Dehavrit, Dehavat. Bhagavad Gita's most common word for body is Deha. And 11 times, which I list, the Gita calls the soul Dehin, one who has a body, or the embodied. Thus soul is distinct from body. Another word for body is Sharira, and the soul is called Sharirin, at 218, one who has a body, or the embodied. The Gita also describes the soul as Deha Brit, one who bears a body. There's three verses that use that term. And Dehavat, one who has a body, once. Krishna twice uses the word Kalevara, also meaning body, to describe how the soul gives up a material body at death. That's at 8, 5, and 6. In the Gita, all these Sanskrit terms, Dehin, Shariran, Dehabrit, Dehavat, and Kalevara, clearly indicate a soul as distinct from its material body. Yet the Gita uses none of these terms, nor any similar terms, to describe Krishna. The Gita gives no indication that Krishna, the Supreme Soul, and he's called the Supreme Soul at 6, 7, 13, 23, 15, 17, no indication that Krishna is different from his body. This is entirely consistent with our analysis of Bhuta. At the start, Krishna tells us that we are eternal souls in temporary bodies. 3 verses. Our body is matter, apara prakriti, the Lord's inferior energy, but we souls are para prakriti, the Lord's superior living energy. The Gita never describes Krishna's body as material, temporary, or limited. Rather, his form is ananta, infinite. That's at 11.16 and 11.38. Krishna describes soul's transmigration from one body to another at 2.13. Souls give up old bodies as one gives up old worn-out clothes, 2.22. However, spiritual knowledge travels with the soul from one body to another. Thus, spiritual practitioners regain spiritual knowledge, quote, from a past body, unquote. That's 643. Many verses describe the soul giving up or letting go of the body. However, none of this language is applied to Krishna. Krishna and Arjuna both appeared in this world many times. The Lord recalls all these births, but Arjuna does not. 4.5. That is because Krishna's birth and activities are divine. 4.9. Due to karma, ordinary souls accept and give up a physical body. But karma laws cannot affect Krishna. 4.14. They cannot force him to accept a material body, for he rules nature with all its laws. That's 9.10. Krishna often states that he is within the soul's body, specifically in the heart. And that's, I give a sample of such verses, 8.2, 8.22, 13.23, 13.3, 13.16, 13.17, 13.28, 15.14, 15.15, 16.18, 18.61. All verses where Krishna explains that he's within the heart of the soul. But Krishna never says that he is within his own body. There's no hint of Krishna giving up his body or of his body taking birth or dying as our bodies do. A final point here. In the Gita, Krishna often speaks of bondage and freedom with various noun and verb forms of the root much. Krishna teaches, like mukti, moksha, Krishna teaches us of the soul's liberation from birth and death. And that's at 2.51, 4.9, 4.14, and many other verses I list, where Krishna talks about the soul being free from death. Freed from karma, 2.39, 3.31. You get the idea. I'm giving all the verses. Freed from evil. And there are a number of verses where Krishna talks about the soul being freed from evil. Freed from anger, lust, and fear. I give several. From duality, from attachment, or simply from bondage. And while one can easily compile a similar list of words indicating bondage, the Gita nowhere hints that Krishna is ever bound by or freed from anything. In the Gita, he is God, personally. Clearly, the Gita teaches that God does not have a material body as we do. He is never bound or freed. Yet Krishna appeared in this world as a human or human-like person. People saw Krishna, embraced him, spoke with him. How are we to understand Krishna's body? Here, too, the Gita comes to our rescue. Now, this next section is called Krishna's original form, or Rupa. We saw that the Gita calls the soul Dehi, Shariri, Dehabrit, and Dehavat, Sanskrit terms indicating one who is somehow separate or different from one's body. None of these Sanskrit terms describe Krishna. The Gita often describes how souls give up their bodies and take another. None of this applies to Krishna. Nothing in the Gita suggests that Krishna is separate or different from his body. Krishna often states that he is within the body of embodied souls, within their hearts, but Krishna never states that he is within his own body. Unlike the soul's birth under the stringent laws of nature, Krishna rules nature and takes divine birth by his own power. And there's reference for that. In the Gita, Krishna appears to Arjuna in three different forms. His normal, quote, sublime human-like form, unquote, 1150. His form with 4 hands holding symbolic objects, 1146. And his cosmic form, 11.9 through 45. Krishna also tells Arjuna to meditate on the supreme divine person as one who possesses an inconceivable form, achintya rupa, colored like the sun beyond darkness, 8.9. If Krishna's form is achintya, inconceivable, how then are we to understand it? The term achintya, inconceivable, does not mean unknowable. Thus, Krishna teaches that one can know many things about the soul, including the fact that souls are achintya, inconceivable. That's at 225. In short, achintya indicates that which we cannot know by our own unaided powers, but which we can know by hearing from Krishna, or from Tattvadarshis, seers of truth. Thus, we can know something of Krishna's body if we hear from Krishna. After all, only Krishna truly knows Krishna. And that's at 10:15. Bhagavad Gita directly mentions Krishna's body 23 times. And 21 times uses the word rupa, a term the Gita never uses for material bodies. Rupa indicates form, shape, figure, and may further mean handsome form, loveliness, grace, beauty, and splendor. That's also from the dictionary. Bhagavad Gita celebrated chapter 11 reveals Krishna's cosmic form by which he pervades, contains, and consumes the universe. The Gita says much more about the cosmic form than it does about the others, and many readers believe this wondrous body to be Krishna's highest form. But textual evidence suggests otherwise. Let us therefore first consider Krishna's spectacular cosmic form, what it means to Arjuna, and its relation to Krishna's other forms, including his regular form as Krishna. Arjuna pointedly asked to see Krishna's cosmic form. Quote, O Supreme Lord, I want to see your lordly form, 11.3. To convey the impact of the original Sanskrit, Ishwara, I use the cognate terms Lord and Lordly. Arjuna addresses Krishna as Parama Ishwara, Supreme Lord, and then asks to see the Aishwara, lordly form. Of course, Aishwara, lordly, is derived from Ishwara, Lord. A question arises. If Krishna is Lord, and Arjuna has been talking to and seeing Krishna for some time, why then ask to see the Lord's lordly form as if it were different from the form of Krishna? Is Krishna's human-like form not the true form of God? After seeing what he asked for, Krishna's cosmic form, which overawes and overwhelms him, as it does many readers, Arjuna bows to Krishna, quote, from in front, from behind, and from all sides, 1140, and says, thinking you a friend, I imposed myself, not knowing this glory of yours, 1141. Here we glimpse an aspect of Krishna that for millennia has charmed and mystified. The all-powerful, all-knowing God plays like a human being, forming such intimate friendships with his devotees that they forget he is God. Thus Arjuna goes on to say, just to tease, I insulted you, Achyuta, in sporting, resting, sitting, and eating, alone or even in company, unquote. Again, these are very literal translations. Arjuna's vision of Krishna's cosmic form jolts him out of confident complacency. Recall Arjuna's opening request, O Supreme Lord, I want to see your lordly form, 11.3. Here Arjuna trusts in his intimate friendship with Krishna. Consider the somewhat common example of famous, rich, powerful people who choose to live where neighbors treat them simply as neighbors, not knowing or caring about the celebrity. We know that famous, rich, powerful people have trouble finding true friends who love them for who they are, not for what they possess. Imagine then the situation of the supreme celebrity, God. Thus Krishna tells Arjuna, I speak this spiritual science to you, for you are my devoted friend. 4.3. We know from Mahabharata that Arjuna and his 4 brothers devoted their lives to Krishna with great love, and Krishna lived with them as if he were a human prince. Such unassuming behavior on God's part can sometimes lead even the devoted to take the Lord for granted. Arjuna recognizes this after seeing the Lord's overwhelming cosmic form and apologizes. He begs to again see the form of Krishna that he knows and loves. After all, the cosmic form, for all its unbearable majesty, is hardly lovable. Krishna complies, and Arjuna sees Krishna with new and chastened eyes. Why did Arjuna ask to see the cosmic form at all? Arjuna tells Krishna, quote, I want to see you, O Supreme Lord, as you described yourself in your lordly form, unquote. In other words, although Krishna had mentioned many times that he is God who rules all, Arjuna did not actually see these powers in his divine but modest friend. Essentially, Arjuna tells Krishna, you say you are God, show me. Krishna replies, behold my hundreds and thousands of forms, 11.5. Behold the entire universe here in one place, in my body, 11.7. But Arjuna cannot see this cosmic revelation with his ordinary eyes, so Krishna gives him divine vision, 11.8. Arjuna then beholds Krishna's cosmic form, which shines like 1,000 suns rising at once in the sky, 11.12. Arjuna sees the entire universe with all its separate forms and divisions within the body of the God of gods, 11.13. Astonished, hair standing up, he bows to God, folds his hands, and tells the Lord what he sees. But then he speaks of something new and dangerous. I see your mouth of blazing fire, burning the cosmos with splendor. Beholding this, your wondrous, fierce form, the three worlds tremble. 11:19-20. Arjuna even sees frightened gods and great sages entering this flaring cosmic form, praying for their well-being. 11:21. The worlds tremble in fear. 11:23. This vision shakes Arjuna to the core of his being, and he finds no peace. 11:24. Significantly, at this terrifying juncture, Arjuna, for the first time in the Gita, addresses the Lord not as Krishna, but rather with the more formal name Vishnu. 11:24. Arjuna then tells that the cosmic form is manifesting dreadful, gaping fangs. Completely disoriented, Arjuna finds no shelter and begs for the Lord's mercy. And anyway, I give all the verse numbers. The battle warriors fly into the cosmic form's devouring mouths, like rivers rushing to the sea or moths rushing into fire. The cosmic form starts to devour all the worlds. Again, calling the Lord Vishnu, Arjuna no longer knows who or what he is seeing. He cries out, "Who are you, so fierce of form?" He then bows to Krishna for the first time in Bhagavad Gita. And even in the Bhagavatam, Mahabharata, because Krishna and Arjuna were the same age, they would just embrace. Arjuna would not bow to him. The Lord replies, "Time I am, destroyer of worlds, expanded to withdraw the worlds." Krishna, for it is Krishna, then exhorts Arjuna to arise, attain glory, and defeat the enemies. For as Krishna declares, "I have already slain the enemies, you just be the instrument." Hands folded, shaking, repeatedly bowing, voice choked, terrified, Arjuna offers prayers to God. In these prayers he acknowledges that he took Krishna for granted and prays, "O God, like father to son, friend to friend, lover to lover, be lenient to me." Arjuna now prays to see not the Lord's cosmic, but rather his personal form. On his way back to stable, peaceful consciousness, he first asks to see Krishna's renowned and majestic four-armed form as Vishnu. After assuring Arjuna that only he has seen such extraordinary forms of the Lord, Krishna again reveals his sublime human-like form as Arjuna's friend. Seeing this form, Arjuna says, "Now I am restored, rational, natural." Krishna assures Arjuna that only by exclusive devotion and not by scriptural study, austerity, charity, or ritual offering can one see Krishna as he really is. And here the chapter ends. We can draw several critical conclusions from this chapter. First, this chapter powerfully reaffirms monotheism. As Krishna begins to reveal his cosmic form, he tells Arjuna to behold the gods within him. And when Arjuna receives the divine vision needed to see this form, his first statement is that he sees the gods inside God's cosmic body, including even Brahma, the supreme creator God. When the cosmic vision turns fearful, Arjuna states that the three worlds, including the highest realm of the gods, tremble in fear. Hosts of terrified gods and great sages, quote, enter you, praying for their own well-being. These astonished gods all gaze upon Krishna's cosmic form. Arjuna declares that God surpasses even Brahma, the first maker. 1137. Careful scrutiny of this chapter suggests that Krishna's cosmic form is not his full revelation of himself, but rather the opposite, a very partial view of God. Apart from terror and confusion, we have no real relationship with the cosmic form. It doesn't really do anything except display infinite splendor and devour the cosmos. Krishna states that he is a kind-hearted friend to all beings, 529, that he reciprocates his devotees' love, 929, that to know him as the Supreme Person is to know everything, 1519, that he personally uplifts those devoted to him, 12.2. This cosmic form offers nothing of this intimacy to God's offers nothing of this intimacy. God's love for us all, his eagerness to help us, is grimly absent in the cosmic form. In fact, when Arjuna directly asks who the cosmic form is, he replies, Krishna, time I am, destroyer of worlds. By comparison, Krishna states in the previous chapter, I am death that takes away everything, and I am the coming forth of all that will be. The cosmic form wields only half of this tandem of powers. Arjuna declares, I am the source of all. From me all proceeds. The cosmic form contains and consumes the cosmos, but does not appear to create it. Krishna inspires Arjuna's love and devotion. The cosmic form terrifies the whole universe, as well as Arjuna, until it literally scares him out of his wits. Only the return of Krishna's original human-like form restores Arjuna to his own true nature, reviving his reason. Thus souls, represented by Arjuna, realize themselves fully in relation to Krishna, not the cosmic form. The soul is part of Krishna and achieves self-realization in relation to Krishna. Part of Krishna is 15.7, and achieves self-realization in relation to Krishna. This points to Krishna as God's full manifestation, not the brief show of God's omnipotence as all-devouring, implacable time. Indeed, throughout the Mahabharata, Arjuna often yearns to see Krishna, but apart from his one request in Bhagavad Gita, he shows no particular interest in seeing the cosmic form. Nonetheless, the cosmic form does serve an essential purpose. It prevents Arjuna and us from taking Krishna for granted. Though this epiphany seems to have escaped many Gita commentators. Still, the cosmic form does chasten and illumine the devoted reader. Elsewhere in the Mahabharata, 5.129, Krishna displays an abridged version of his cosmic form. There, too, he awards divine vision to those fortunate to see it. Next, I will explain the Gita's concept of buddhi, spiritual intelligence or reason, which Krishna tells us is essential for success on all spiritual paths. After this preface, we will then consider the specific spiritual paths that lead to liberation: karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, and bhakti yoga. So that's the end of that chapter. So I think that gives you an idea of what the book's about. And there's a similar analysis of all the different, the main points of the Gita, all the different forms of yoga. What is knowledge? What is a teacher? What is karma? What is sacrifice? How the universe works, the cosmic cycle that actually sustains the universe, and so on. Any questions on these points? Yes. Well, Johnny. I explained that you have to understand the root of the word achintya. The root verb is chint, and then chintya means chintable, and achintya means achintable. So what does chint mean? Chint, it's interesting that for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the description of the Asuras, you have the word chinta. And actually there's chintamani, the chinta jewel. But chinta in the Gita means anxiety or worry. Chinta aparimeya, that the demons are full of innumerable chintas, anxieties and worries. So therefore, to be chintya, which we often translate conceivable, if we go deeply into what the Sanskrit word is, chintya ultimately means to worry over, like something you worry over it, and you could understand it just by sort of mental anxiety, in the sense of straining your brain, struggling to understand something. And so what Krishna is really saying, to say that something is achintya, he describes the soul as achintya. It's what we would call in English, in normal philosophical language or academic language in English, unaided reason. In other words, there's no aid of a revelation. No one reveals anything to you. no divine revelation, you simply think real hard. You strain your brain and think very hard and figure it out. That's the sense of chint. And so therefore to say something is a chintya means unaided reason, simply thinking really hard about it, is not going to reveal it. I mean, you could, sit on a mountaintop under the stars trying as hard as you can to understand God, and it's not like suddenly, I got it, blue cowherd boy. How could I not have seen that? And of course, the reason we can't, we cannot figure out, like, Krishna chooses to be blue, although he accessorizes his body with a yellow cloth. But the reason you can't figure it out is because Krishna's decisions, Krishna's choices, are not the end product of a causal chain, a deterministic causal chain. For example, let's say someone in the field of microbiology is trying to understand what causes a certain disease. So basically what the researchers trying to do is discover a causal chain, the end product of which is a disease. So you can say, okay, the disease occurs because the body is malfunctioning in a certain way, or because some other organism has attacked the body and caused it to malfunction in a certain way, or deactivated some essential part of the body. And so why, how did that element get into the body? And so you try to, what you're actually doing is working your way back through time. In fact, events, you could say, they happen by moving forward through time, but then you start with whatever situation or fact that you want to analyze, and you trace it back. So things move forward through time, analysis moves backward through time. But so the whole basis of, let's say, the controlled experiment, or material science, or even social science, is the assumption that if you have this cause, you must get that effect. Because if things happen at random, then there's no telling why it happened. So our ability to come up with a particular ology, from the Greek logos, the logic of something, whether it's physiology or biology or geology, or actually, we should really feel sorry for the astronomers because they lost the ology word. Every other academic department got the ology word, but they lost it. They were stuck with astronomy because the astrologers, in astrology, they got the ology word. And they've actually never gotten over it. But anyway, so the reason that we make a distinction between the hard sciences and the human or soft sciences is because when we're studying human behavior, there's a really serious problem, which spoils our attempt to construct a hard science of human behavior, and the problem is free will. So if you flip a coin, it's not that the coin in midair says, "Oh, watch this," and then it flips over because I want to come up heads this time. I'm going to come up heads every time. I'm going to befuddle this researcher. Coins, when you flip them, don't have free will. Or if you roll, if an apple falls from a tree, the famous Newton epiphany, the apple has no free will. The apple can't decide to grab onto a branch and not fall. And so when you're dealing with unconscious things that do not have free will, given a certain cause, there must be a certain effect. It's deterministic. In other words, the cause determines the effect. Whereas someone can, for example, talk to you trying to convince you to buy something, and the person may use all the techniques learned in business school, or the psychology of the consumer, but you may just decide, I don't want it. I mean, Hollywood, for example, they have their formulas, they have their research, their marketing research, and sometimes a studio may spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a movie, and it totally bombs. There's a long list of movies where they used all their tools of analysis, all their trusted formulas for plot development, character development, and the movie totally bombed. And so, Krishna, if you think about it, like, why are certain activities sinful? Because sinful activities are activities that tend to destroy freedom by producing irresistible habits or addictions. So if you think about it, if someone's addicted to a drug or addicted to sex or to gambling, because that addiction has overcome their free will, a certain behavior like taking certain forms of drugs or engaging too much in sex, behavior actually rewires the brain. That's why, if you say that, okay, I've developed a habit, in the sense that I've done this several times and now I've developed this habit, what does it mean? When you say, as you perceive it, at the level of consciousness, I now have this habit, obviously there's a neurological correspondence. Something happened in your neurology, and now you have a habit, or an addiction, or a need, or an attachment. Even if you say, okay, I spent too much time with this person, now I've developed an attachment. There's a neurological correspondence there. What you perceive at the level of consciousness as an attachment, there is a rewiring of your brain, your nervous system, so that you perceive this attachment. And so the more we become attached or averse to things, the less we act freely. By definition, a priori. The less we act freely, the more our behavior starts to resemble the behavior of physical objects, of unconscious, dead physical objects, where, given a certain stimulus, I have to behave in a certain way because I've lost the freedom. That's what addiction means. That my own behavior is becoming deterministic, like the behavior of a dead physical object. And so we can actually understand that certain activities, like I raised the point that, the question Socrates raises, are certain acts good because the gods love them? In other words, does the fact that Krishna just likes something make it good? Or does Krishna like something because it is intrinsically good? And of course, you could ask the opposite question, namely, does Krishna forbid certain things just because he doesn't like them? Or is it that he doesn't like them because they're objectively bad? And so we find that Krishna encourages us to give up certain activities because they destroy our own freedom. It's just like parents saying to their children, could you please stay out of jail? It's the hope of every parent that their children stay out of jail. So, but Krishna, being completely transcendental to all material attachment aversion, is an infinitely free being. And because Krishna is infinitely free, he is the least likely candidate for a deterministic analysis. In other words, a deterministic analysis would mean that, okay, given the world as we know it, we study the world and we say, well, given the world as we know it, there must be a God who's like this. But that would only be the case if Krishna's creation of the world was deterministic. In other words, Krishna had to create it a certain way. He couldn't create it another way. Therefore, it's deterministic. And but that's not the case. Krishna creates the world in a certain way. Krishna made the sky blue. Why? He felt like it. It was an artistic decision. And a good one. I think we all give a round of applause to Krishna for the blue sky. I think it was a brilliant choice. And then water's blue. So it's, trees are green. It's just Krishna chose these things. And because he's not forced to choose them, you can't analyze what he does deterministically, and you cannot work your way backward through a causal chain to understand God. It's very simple. So in that sense, Krishna is achintya. He's inconceivable in the sense of you can't figure it out yourself. Krishna's not that predictable. None of us like to be predictable. If it turns out that everybody knows what like you say something and everyone says, we knew you were going to say that. and you do something, and everyone says, yeah, we knew you were going to do that. It's not very flattering to think that one is so shallow that everyone knows what you're going to do and say. It's hardly the case with Krishna. So, hence Krishna is Achintya. But that you can know Krishna, but to know Krishna, you have to, knock on his door and introduce yourself. Krishna is a nice guy. He's a good neighbor. He says in Bhagavad Gita, Suhridak Sarva Bhutanam, he actually has he's kind-hearted, literally, kind-hearted, good-hearted toward all living beings. So Krishna is knowable, just like you, for example. If someone knocks on just barges into your house and says, I want to understand you, so I'm going to be sleeping here for the next 2 months. And I want to know everything you're doing, and I want to know why you're doing it. And then, of course, you call 9/11, and that crazy person goes to jail. So Krishna is knowable, but he has to reveal himself to us. So that's the difference. Sure, anytime. Yes. Oh yes, the word Bhuta is used for various things. It can also mean sort of ghosts, including, I guess, Casper the Friendly Ghost. Casper the Friendly Bhuta. So, yes, it can mean that, a Bhuta. What? Boo, oh. Well, everything comes from India, so I guess it probably does. Yes.
Maharaj, in terms of your efforts to make this spiritual knowledge accessible to Westerners, since you've been here, you mentioned a couple times Prabhupada mentioning 3 things he didn't want to change: philosophy, practice, and institutions. So you've repeatedly stated that you're doing Vrindaban to change all 3.
What? Do I repeatedly say it?
But you did mention. But my question is, on a more personal and practical level, if you ask the people that were here during our time of turmoil, the thing that changed the most that people objected to was the music. The music that was Christianized and so on. It was modified in limited ways. And that's what people found most objectionable. So I asked Jai Govinda a year or 2 ago what was happening in Krishna West, and he said that you were using the traditional Bengali, so to speak, songs and stuff. My question is, do you think that you'll be able to do anything really significant without people chanting in the vernacular?
Okay. That's the question. So tell me what I can win if I answer this right. Like those game shows, they say, like, if you answer this question. It reminds me of this really funny Far Side cartoon. I'll answer. It's a really funny Far Side cartoon. It's one of these game shows like Jeopardy. And they had the 2, the people sitting behind these counters with all their points displayed. And so behind one counter, there was all these typical Americans, 0, 0, 0, 0. And then the other counter, there was just one guy with white robes and a white beard, and he had like millions of points. And then the announcer said, yes, the answer is Wisconsin, another 10,000 points for God. So anyway, Narottam Das Thakur, for example, wrote songs in Bengali. I think we have to understand that was somewhat revolutionary. Because if you look at Vaishnav history in general, the Vaishnav tradition has always been quite or has often been, I should say, quite revolutionary. Because all these statements that we take for granted but also appreciate, like Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyasi, Shudra Kininai, Jai Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hoy, whether one is a Shudra or sannyasi or whatever one is, if you know that whoever knows the science of Krishna is a guru, or that a Brahmin who knows all the Vedas is considered unqualified if he doesn't worship Krishna. It's not that all the ritualistic Brahmins who had tremendous social power, it's not they just took this sitting down. They were outraged by these statements. And the idea of making God available to everyone. So they fought against this. And so if you look at the history of Vaishnavism, it's often a fight for legitimacy. I mean, the Brahmins had tremendous political and social power, even economic power. And there was this battle. And so so one thing the Vaishnavas did, historically, is that they would present themselves in Sanskrit, because if you presented your views in Sanskrit, that already gave you a certain, we were talking about that, a certain level of legitimacy. And of course they were great scholars, and many of the Vaishnavas were themselves caste Brahmins. And so, interestingly, because of this constant struggle, we see Baladev Vidyabhushan writing the Vedanta commentary and so on. So because of this struggle, to reverse that Sanskritization, vernacularization, and to write in Bengali, showed how sincere and how anxious acharyas like Narottam were to reach the people. And so there's something totally Monty Python about thinking that because Narottam wrote in Bengali so that people could understand what they were singing, that obviously we should sing in Bengali so people can't understand what they're singing. So, I mean, clearly, I mean, the songs, the Bengali songs, as we know, they're beautiful, and they're a treasure within our tradition. So we preserve them. We should preserve them and sing them. However, if we actually want to follow the acharyas, we should also, we have to have songs in the various languages, so that on the one hand, people in every country can sing in their own language. At the same time, we have Sanskrit and Bengali songs, so that all the Vaishnavas from all countries can still be united. And so it's just you need balance. We should have a liturgy. We should have spiritual traditions, services, and songs which unite all the Vaishnavas of the world. And at the same time, we obviously have to give people a chance to sing a song where they actually know what they're singing. So I think we have to do both. As far as Sanskrit, I think Sanskrit is almost universally recognized as an extremely elegant language. I know when I was at Harvard, I had a professor of Sanskrit who began at Stanford as a student of classical languages, Greek and Latin, and then switched to Sanskrit because he found it so much more interesting and elegant and difficult, he said. So, there are elements of our practice which really are universal. Excuse me. Sanskrit, for example, is an Indo-European language. Sanskrit is intimately connected to all the European languages except Basque, Hungarian, and Finnish. So it's not, I mean, Sanskrit is, it's not foreign to Western people. For example, we have this charming word we say, Mataji. But actually in Sanskrit, if you were addressing your mother, you would say Mater. And brother is Brater. So, it's clearly, I find people are actually fascinated by the connection, the fact that when we bring Krishna consciousness to Western countries, we're not imposing a foreign culture, but actually, in a real sense, we are giving people their original culture. And if anything is somewhat foreign, if you talk about a foreign intrusion, it would be more the intrusion of Middle Eastern traditions, which come from a foreign language family and have, foreign traditions. If you look at, for example, religion in Rome and the Roman Empire, it's very much what I call Mediterranean Hinduism. I mean, obviously there are some differences, but there are thousands of similarities. So there was such a thing as Indo-European culture. There are Indo-European languages, and so as far as the music, yeah, I mean, in Krishna West, undoubtedly one of the most uncontroversial programs in ISKCON, we're not really getting so much involved in let's say, the big temples, deity worship. We're not interfering with that or trying to change that. Simply trying to do actually what Prabhupada did long ago, and that is spread the movement all around the world with simple preaching centers, often with Panchatattva pictures and Paramparam Panchatattva. And Prabhupada actually spread the movement all around the world like that. So, the menace of Krishna West will not be coming soon to your mandir. Another question? Yes. Yeah, Gita Gan, yeah. Well, it is the Bhagavad Gita. Oh, it's the same. It's the same in the sense that it's presenting this knowledge to people in a way they can understand and appreciate it. Obviously, Bengalis 50 years ago are not exactly like Americans or Germans 50 years later. And so I think that the universal principle is communicating. Communicating. Just finding a way to communicate. Prabhupada gave that famous example that if your neighbor's house is on fire, even if you don't understand the language, you communicate. And actually our neighbor's house is on fire because samsara davanala lidaloka. Yes.
In our interactions with other jivas who are in bodies, how much of the soul are we able to perceive in that interaction? How much of the soul comes through?
Well, you got to get out your gunometer. And, take a reading. So, the idea is that in the mode of ignorance, the soul is pretty much mummified. In the mode of ignorance, it's just heavily covered. And then in the mode of compassion, it just means the covering is not as thick. And in the mode of goodness, we're really starting to see the soul, in a sense, in acts of goodness and virtue. And of course, the more we are Krishna conscious, the more we see the soul in everyone. Yes?
In the Bhagavad Gita, most of the verses, maybe 80-90% are like every line is like 8 syllables. Is there any significance to that?
Yeah. In Sanskrit literature, there was a very sophisticated knowledge of meter and accent rhythm, like da-dun, 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 or da-da-dun, 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 dun-dun. And so, it's the rhythm, and by short and long syllables. And the Sanskrit authors were masters of meter and rhythm. And so, just as we say, like Kleenex, which is a brand name, but it became so, shloka is like Kleenex, in the sense that technically a shloka is a verse with 4 8-syllable lines. But because that became the meter of choice, or the most common way of composing, shloka came to mean a verse in general. Yeah, Prabhupada once, someone said, Prabhupada said that. Someone said, so Krishna composed the Gita. And Prabhupada said, well, Vyasa, presented to us. But Vyasa is also an avatar. And so Krishna didn't entrust his Gita to an amateur. And therefore, we actually have the Gita that Krishna wants us to have. So in that sense, Vyasa, to say avatar, Shakti Avesha, which means, Avesha means investing. Krishna invested his potency in Vyasa, Shakti Avesha. And that means, even if Vyasa did it, it was really Krishna. Anything else? Yes. Oh. Well, maybe I could talk about my time with Prabhupada in New Vrindavan. This is really just water, please believe me. Don't believe what you read on the internet. Of course, I came to see Prabhupada here, and what's that? 1972. I also came 1971, but Prabhupada wasn't here, and I was a Grihastha temple president in Gainesville, and I came with my wife, Ananga Manjari, an excellent devotee, and anyway, so that was at the old Vrindavan farm. That's all they had then. So somehow it expanded in 1972. I came as a sannyasi, actually, just a few months, maybe 3 months after I took sannyas. I came to New Vrindavan, and I stayed with Prabhupada in that house. Yeah, Madhuban. And on his Vyas Puja day, it was interesting, on his Vyas Puja day, they had that little pavilion, or that little, pandal set up on top of the hill at Bahulaban. And so I remember Vishnu Jana Swami chanted the Samsara prayers, and then Prabhupada had the sannyasis come one by one and just speak for 5 minutes or so. And then Prabhupada gave his talk, and then it was time he got off the stage, and he was supposed to be driven back to his house in Madhuban. And Bali Mardan, who was the president of New York, and kind of like, in those days, he was, anyway, he was making all these arrangements, but somehow there was a glitch, and the car didn't come to pick up Prabhupada. So I just thought, go for it. So I ran over. I had this shiny yellow Volkswagen Beetle that had been donated to me by a really nice brahmachari in Texas, who had just got it as a gift from his father, which I'm sure, bringing great joy to his father. But of course, in those days, we didn't think of those things, because non-devotees were basically aliens from outer space. And so, anyway, so I ran to my car, jumped in the car, and and pulled up right in front of Prabhupada, opened the door, and I said, Prabhupada, the car is ready. And I remember Bali Mardan, if looked at me like they say, like with daggers, it just as if I cared. And so I drove Prabhupada up the road here. And as we were driving up the road, I had an existential dilemma, because Prabhupada didn't put a seatbelt on. And those were the days where there were signs everywhere, put on your seatbelt, use your seatbelt. And I was thinking, well, what about Prabhupada's safety? Well, but he's a pure devotee. I can't tell him what to do, or I don't want to bother him. Because Prabhupada's always kind of deep in his own meditation. And so by the time, I was still trying to figure out whether I should ask him to put on the seatbelt when we arrived at Madhuban. So we arrived at Madhuban, and there had been another glitch. And that is that Prabhupada asked for a bit of the birthday cake that had been made for him. But the Prabhujis, back at Bahulaban, thinking that it was already Mahaprasadam, had devoured it, along with Prabhupada's lunch. So on the Vyas Puja day, Prabhupada took it all sort of in stride. and he just told his servant Nanda Kumar to cook lunch again. And then there were other funny things. One time, Prabhupada was taking his massage, and I remember one of his disciples was massaging him, a sannyasi, for a big, strong body, and Prabhupada wanted it really hard on his back, and somehow this big, strong sannyasi wasn't doing it hard enough. So Prabhupada was saying, he turned to him and said, "Not like cotton swabs." And then Prabhupada said to him, if you're not strong enough, get someone else. And then another time, Prabhupada was getting his massage, and remember there were two little kittens, just sort of stray kittens, two very little kittens, and they were playing, and they sort of grabbed each other in such a way that they formed a perfect little round ball, the two of them. And they actually started rolling. And they rolled right up onto Prabhupada's lap. And of course, 1972, we were extremely mature. So I was thinking, oh, that's disgusting, animal, because like in the early days of the movement, animals were evil. And if you touched an animal, it was like killing a cow or something. And so these two kittens just rolled right onto Prabhupada's lap, and I was horrified. And to my great surprise, Prabhupada acted like a normal human being. If I could just put in parentheses here, I had another experience like that. I have a friend, Hridayananda Dasa Goswami, who, whenever I tell him stories like that, he says, "It's not a cult." But anyway, so one time we were walking with Prabhupada in Los Angeles at Rancho Park, my old neighborhood park, Rancho Park. I played Little League Baseball, took swimming lessons, and played tennis. And Prabhupada would walk all over these areas. So we were walking one day in a certain part of the park, and then someone came and said, "Giri Raj's mother is here." Of course, Giri Raj was, I think he was Brahmachari then. And so we all stopped. Prabhupada stopped, and then we saw, I don't know, like 100 yards down the trail, Giri Raj's mother coming. So she walked up, and Prabhupada was a perfect gentleman, just like he was with my mother when he met her. He's a perfect gentleman. And then he did something which, again, shocked me. I didn't think Prabhupada did anything wrong, but I had no idea you could do such things in Vedic culture. And that is, he shook hands with her. Not that, oh my God. Prabhupada actually touched her hand. He shook hands with her. So anyway, back to our little kittens on Prabhupada's lap. So then Prabhupada, to my utter amazement, petted them. I mean, they were so little, he just took his fingers, kind of petted the kittens. And the kittens were totally oblivious to Prabhupada. They were just like completely trusting. They were just rolling around on Prabhupada's lap. And so Prabhupada looked at us, and looked at me and said, "If you put your head in my lap, and I cut your throat, that is the greatest sin." In other words, if someone trusts you, completely trusts you, and you betray that person, that's the greatest sin. Then another time, I've told this story before, but it's sort of at my expense. In those days, Prabhupada would spend a lot of time in India, and his secretaries would send us all this information, like Prabhupada said you have to do this, and Prabhupada said you can't do that. And so one of the instructions we got was that it was very important to wash your hands after eating. I mean, we used to do that but in India, especially back then, if you ate and didn't wash your hands, it was considered to be barbaric. And so Prabhupada was training his Western disciples how to not be barbaric in India. And so there was this great emphasis, you have to wash your hands after you eat. The secretary. So then, one day we were in Prabhupada's room while he was eating breakfast. He had a little darshan in the morning, and there were guests there. There was a reporter from the New York Times. There were different people there. And so Prabhupada ate his breakfast, and then I said, "Prabhupada, can I give out your remnants?" He said, "Okay." So I took the tray, and I was going around the room giving everyone some remnants from Prabhupada's breakfast. And then I had this horrible thought. Oh no, They've all eaten Prabhupada's remnants, and not one of them washed their hands. In my defense, I was 23 years old, and as a 23-year-old male, legally insane. I took sannyasa, as I say, several years before my brain fully matured, physiologically. So anyway, so I was thinking that they didn't wash their hands, and Prabhupada didn't care. But we'd heard these instructions, so I said to Prabhupada, "Can I bring some water to wash their hands?" And Prabhupada kind of looked at me. He said, "All right." So I ran out and I got some water and I went around the room and everyone rinsed their hands off. Dudley Do-Right. And so, but then a doubt entered my mind, like, is it really that important to wash your hands? Because Prabhupada didn't seem so delighted with me interrupting all his preaching twice, to give out the prasadam and wash everyone's hands. So I think maybe it's not so important. Maybe it's just, Prabhupada says. And so that evening I came back. Somehow I came back late. It was like 10:30 at night because I was staying in the same house as Prabhupada. And I noticed his light was on, so I went in. And he was talking to, I think, Sudam Swami. And sometimes Prabhupada, because he worked very hard, Prabhupada. He worked very, very hard. And so sometimes at night he would take little prasadam. So I think he was taking some fried potatoes and puri. And so then Prabhupada said to Sudam, "Give him some." Because at that point Sudam was eating the remnants. Prabhupada was always concerned everyone got prasadam. So then I took some, and as I took it I thought, that all these stories about washing your hands and everything. So I just ate it, sort of sat there, and then Prabhupada looked at me and he said, "What is this? You were a sannyasi, you don't even know to wash your hands?" So I jumped to my feet. It was like really like something out of like a Daffy Duck cartoon or something, because I held my danda and I ran to go out of the room my danda was crossways, so boom, I couldn't fit out the door, so I had to back up, straighten out my danda, and then rush out. And I washed my hands. I remember one time, I was not used to country life. I wasn't. So it gets really dark at night in the country. New Vrindaban back then, there was hardly any electricity. We were staying up in that, down, or over there at that house of Prabhupada. And so one night, nature's call, so I had to go out, 11 o'clock at night or something. And I didn't want to just do it right, on the lawn where Prabhupada was staying, and that was obviously inappropriate. And so I sort of, if you look at that, you can still see where the marker is, and then the land kind of goes down. So I kind of climbed down a little bit, and it was pitch black. You couldn't see anything. And I was not a farm boy, country boy. And so I was like groping my way down. I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black. Oh, and actually, the day before, Gayagriva and I had a shotgun pulled on us. The relations with the neighbors back then were not as sublime as they are now. And I had a shotgun pulled on us, and the sheriff came, and so having had a shotgun pulled on me the day before, going down in this absolute black, I couldn't see anything. And then when I'm down there, and I start to climb back up, and I hear someone up on the lawn. And I was thinking, oh my God. And I was like, I went into my, it's like, what do they say? Fight or flight. So I started climbing back up. G.I. Joe Goswami. Prepared to run or to fight or anything. And my heart pounding. And then the person who was making the noise, it was Prabhupada. And he came out for the same purpose. But what was really interesting about this is that where I was in this, fight to the death mood, all my adrenaline flowing, Prabhupada just laughed. Here he comes out, late in the middle of the night, it's pitch black, he hears someone rustling down near his house, He just like laughed it off when he saw me. And he really was fearless, Prabhupada. I remember we were also walking to Vrindaban, actually on this road here, we were walking around a bend and some big dog came up. And it started barking and barking. We all looked at each other, and Prabhupada just, he stepped forward with his cane, hut, hut. Prabhupada's famous dog-chasing monosyllable. And chased the dog away. And that was not the only time. One time we were walking on Venice Beach, and we were all like little ducklings, whatever Prabhupada did, we did. So after we walked on the beach, we'd come back to the paved parking lot, and Prabhupada would stamp his feet to get the sand off, so everyone would stamp their feet. It was like this parampara foot stamping. And so one day we came back, and we were going through our ritual foot stamping, and these big dogs came up, and it was like a Great Dane. It's either a small horse or a very large dog. I mean, maybe it was a small barking horse, but it was really big. And I remember, we were all there, and Brahmananda was there, and he was like, no one wanted to go forward, because this dog was like really big. So we were all looking at each other, and then Prabhupada just stepped forward and hut, hut, and chased the dog away. Laughing all the while. I remember when I used to walk with Prabhupada at Venice Beach, he was so youthful. I like to walk on the beach, and I like to walk really close to the water. It's kind of like this, game to see how close you can get without getting your shoes wet. And Prabhupada would walk close to the water. And I remember sometimes, what he called a rogue wave. Sometimes you'd get a bigger wave, and Prabhupada would sort of scamper up the sandbank. He had great reactions. He would just, like a young boy, he would just run away from the wave. So, what else happened here at New Vrindavan? On Janmashtami night, I was, being a very advanced Vaishnava, my mind was completely fixed on the clock. And I was watching the clock. When is it midnight? Because we were fasting, so Prabhupada was sitting there on the Vyasasana, and around midnight, I was hoping he'd say, okay, that's it, everybody, prasana, but he didn't. So at 12 o'clock he said, okay, we'll read Krishna book. So he had Krishna book read to him, and it was interesting because as the clock wore on, it was like 12, 12:30, 1, 1:30, and Prabhupada was getting stronger and stronger. And I was, sort of having a, leave your body experience. And I saw that the devotees, they were kind of like, everyone's kind of having a near-death experience. But Prabhupada was getting stronger and stronger. He sat up straighter, and he was relishing Krishna Leela. And finally, I forget what time, he finally said, okay. So that, you could really see who is who. I remember also sitting at Prabhupada, that was at Bahulava, I remember sitting at Prabhupada's feet, and he said something I'd heard him say before, which really thrilled me. And he said that, just go out and preach, don't worry about money. Just go out. Obviously, if I go out to preach and I decide that, in order to preach I have to buy, a $30 million house, so that's what Krishna will pay for it. I think what Prabhupada meant was that you actually pay attention to what Krishna is providing you. And if you do sincerely preach, and just try to preach, just try to present Krishna to people, then Krishna will provide all that you need. And I was thrilled by that because personally I'm not inclined to business, although I'm very happy that some of us are. But personally it just wasn't me. So the idea that Prabhupada was authorizing us, urging us, just to go out and preach, and that if we did that, Krishna would, and Prabhupada always used to give that example, any big man pays for publicity. So if you make publicity for Krishna, he'll pay the bill. But again, we preach, and then as resources come in, we engage them for Krishna. And that's what Prabhupada did. If we decide to do something when the resources aren't there and there's no real way to get them, we may get ourselves in an embarrassing situation. But the idea was that if we just go out and preach, Krishna would give us all we needed. And he said that at New Vrindavan also. So there are some stories for you. So anything else? Oh, is that my coat? Thank you.
We'd like to thank Maharaj for his wonderful discourse and stories tonight by chanting very loudly. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare